Hi, welcome to Chard Review. Today we'll be covering a 2016 romance drama film called Never Gone. The movie opens up with a beautiful young girl named Soo Young-jin roaming around the streets searching for someone special. She stops and looks at someone in the distance, and the scene changes. We are then taken to the year 2007 where Young-jin is waiting for the bus. She narrates her story, explaining her family's weak economic conditions and about her ill father. She mentions that despite having financial problems, her parents have managed to send her to the best college for her higher studies when she reaches her new college. Young-jin seems quite different and confused compared to other students. While she is walking, a fancy motorbike drives past her, causing a nearby pipe to burst, getting her soaking wet. The boy on the bike is introduced as Chung Jiang, who belongs to a rich family and is famous at the school. Furious, Young-jin rushes towards Chung to scold them, but as she is about to do so, a flying baseball flung at her is caught by Chung. After this, Chung walks away, suggesting Young-jin be careful inside the school. Young-jin befriends another student, Mo-yuwa, who has the same family. Background is her mom tells her that she will help her to adapt to the new school environment. We are then introduced to Chang's three friends Mong, Shu, Josiah, and Song Ming. Later, mom takes her to the class where she sits in front of Chung. In the next scene, after the math papers are distributed, we get to know that Young-jin has got a very low score, whereas Chung has got a perfect one. Seeing her score, Mung starts to make fun of her. Young-in is about to head to the washroom in the middle of the math test when Chung stops her and snatches her notebook. She tries her best to get the notebook back, but then a menstrual pad drops from the notebook, making Young-jin embarrassed, and she leaves the class. After the incident, Chung feels really sad and guilty for disturbing and humiliating Young-jin. In the next class, Chung tries to return Young-jin's book to her. He pokes her from behind, but Young-jin gives no response. After that, Chung throws the notebook on her table, irritated by Chang's behavior. Young-jin picks up her chair and places it on his leg, making him scream in pain. She then opens the book, which Chung just threw, but is surprised to see all of her mistakes highlighted and corrected. During lunch, Mong and Jo approached Young-jin and informed her about Chang's leg injury. Hearing this, Young-jin gives them her card for his treatment. However, the duo buy lunch for all their classmates instead. Later, Mo approaches Chung and mentions that the money on Young-jin's card was her pocket money. For an entire month after school, we see Young-jin standing on the roof of the school, thinking about something. Chung arrives there and teases Young-jin by pulling her hair to cover up his mistakes. Chung asks Young-jin if he can help her with her math. Young-jin is about to leave, but Chung asked her to think logically about the offer. Young-jin starts remembering her teacher, telling her to increase her grades in math and agrees to be tutored by Chung. Chung starts teaching math to Young-jin regularly after school. Young-jin also starts enjoying studying with Chung, even though his behavior annoys her sometimes. Surprisingly, Young-jin gets an 85 on her math test and is thrilled to see her improvement. Because of the time they're spending together, Young-jin and Chung start getting closer. One day, Young-jin has to leave her home because of a family emergency. She does not return to school for some time. While she is away, Chung becomes distracted and loses his focus on his studies. One day, Mo sits in Yanjun's seat and Chung angrily confronts her about it. However, she replies that Young-jin told her to sit there as she is back in her dorm room. Hearing this, Chung runs towards Young-jin's room and knocks for her to open the door. After multiple attempts, Young-jin opens the door crying with the black band on her hand. The black band implies that her father has died. He tries talking to young Jean, but she ignores him and asks him to stay away from her. A couple of years passed by and they are at the end of their final. Here at the graduation party, Chung cannot take his eyes off young Jean. Mon decides to express her love for Joe and gathers the courage to ask him to dance. Chung also approaches young Jean and asks for a dance, to which she agrees. After the party, Chung and young Jean can be seen roaming outside. Here, Chung expresses his love for her. Young Jean says nothing and kisses Chung, delighted. He thinks it is her way of approving the relationship, but in fact it is a farewell kiss by young Jean. She feels that Chang's family is rich and will never accept her hence. She decides to be apart from Chung and leaves, leaving him alone in the dark. The scene then fast forwards to a year where young Jean is now a university student. To pay for her tuition, she works at the university library. There she meets a senior student, Shenwan, who seems to be a kind-hearted man. As both of them are working together in the library, they built a special bond with each other. One day, young Jean is talking with Mo when she tells her that Shin is a good man who genuinely cares for her. While they are talking Yunjin here, someone calling her name Yoonjin rushes outside to find Young approaching her. Since it has been so long since they've seen each other, their conversation is awkward. Yunjin tries to leave, but Chung stops her. Meanwhile, Shin arrives and introduces himself as young Jenna's boyfriend. Surprisingly, Chung also introduces himself as her boyfriend. However, young Jean interrupts Chang's words and tells Shane that he is just an old high school classmate. After that, Shin reminds Youngin about their plan to visit the countryside. Hearing this, Chung offers them a ride. Chung's sister Jonghwa introduces herself to Shin as she is the one driving the car. Later, they reach a temple where they kneel down to pray and write their wishes on paper. Young Jean tries to peek at what Chung is writing, but he moves aside and covers it. Soon, they exit the temple and Zhang Ashen to accompany her to buy some water, leaving Chung and Yunjin alone. After they leave, Chung asks young Jean why she left him and is no longer interested in him. He then forces himself on Yunjin. Shin sees this from a distance. After the temple visit, the group goes to a restaurant for dinner. There, Chung mentions their first kiss and forces Yunjin to take a drink. Annoyed by Chang's behavior, she takes a drink, which makes her dizzy and fall unconscious. Despite her drunk state, she keeps uttering Chang's name. In the next scene, Yunjin tries to speak with Shane at the library, but he ignores her. He then tells her that she is still in love with Chung. Hearing this, young Jean rushes to Chang's hotel room and confronts him for his earlier behavior. Instead of being apologetic, Chung replies that he too suffered a lot after she left him at the graduation party. A year later, Shin has graduated and Yunjin is again alone in her life. Chung has not contacted her since the incident. Yunjin's mother asks her to return home for an important family decision. Yunjin turns down our holiday job and reaches her hometown. It turns out that Yunjin's mother is asking permission to marry Uncle Wu, who has helped the family in critical situations. For the sake of her mother's happiness, Yunjin accepts the proposal while she is walking with her mother. Out of nowhere, Chung appears in front of her. Chung visits Yunjin's house where we learn that he is there to work with his mother, who has recently bought the electric company in the area. Later, he annoys Yunjin, who is busy making paper rabbits. Chung tries to make one and Yunjin underestimates him. After Yunjin leaves, Chung stays there all night, making the paper rabbits, and in the process he also gets his hands bruised. The next day, Yunjin comes to Chung to find him asleep with the 5 rabbits he had made. Seeing Chung working hard for her, Young Jin starts liking him. She also agrees when Chung asks her to come to Beijing to stay with her after her graduation. In the next scene, Young Jin rigorously applies for a job in Beijing as her graduation nears, despite her multiple attempts. The company in Beijing replies to her applications. Suddenly, she gets a job offer from Shanghai and accepts it. Chung calls her at the same time and says that he has found a job for her in Beijing. But when Yunjin tells him that she accepted a job from Shanghai, he gets angry and disconnects the call. Feeling guilty, Yunjin decides to visit Chung via train. While on the train, Chung calls her and apologizes for his behavior earlier. He then informs her that he is on his way to Shanghai to meet her. Because of this, they decide to stop at his station that lies in between. They finally meet and are very happy to be together. They spend their night in a nearby hotel, spending some quality time. The movie again. Fast forward a few years where we see Chung and Young Jin setting up their new apartment. Later, Chung takes Yunjin to his sister's engagement ceremony. When they get there, they are surprised to see Shin as John's fiancée. Chung tries to make Jung understand that China is not good for her and is aiming for her property rather than understanding him. Jung doubts Young Jin for the same reason. On the other hand, Shana approaches Young Jin and reveals that he is, in fact, with John for her property. Hearing this, Young Jin asked him to take care of John and not to hurt her. In the next scene, Yunjin is visited by Uncle Wu at her office. He explains to Yunjin that her mother has been diagnosed with cervical cancer. He also reveals that before dying, her father borrowed some money from the factory he worked in so that he could treat his wife. Now it is time to pay back the money, so he seeks Young Jin's help. After Uncle Wu leaves, Yunjin calls her friends, asks him to lend money, but none of them can lend her the massive amount of 200 CN yen 1000. When Yunjin returns home, Chung tells her that he called Uncle Wu and is well aware of her mother's condition. He also gives her 300,000 yuan and asks her to give it to Uncle Wu to clear the debt. However, Yunjin refuses to take the money, stating that she has already managed the money from Shun. Hearing this, Chung gets angry because she chose Shin to share her situation rather than him. Furious, he heads straight to meet Shin and throws the money at his face, asking him to stay away from their personal affairs. In the following scene, Chung is with his friends. A bar drinking recklessly, Ming calls Young Jin and informs her about their location. In no time, Yunjin arrives there and asks Chung to come home with her. Angry, Chung refuses a request and instead hugs Meng to make her jealous. Seeing this, Yunjin asks his friends to drop him home after the party and leaves late at night. Chung arrives home drunk and falls on the couch. Yunjin comes near him and hands him a letter where she states that she owes him 300,000 yuan. Annoyed by her behavior, Chung shouts at her, saying that even after all of these years of being together, she still cannot love him. Because of this, he decides that they should separate. The scene then fast-forwards 2 years when Yunjin visits the same temple that she and Chung had visited before. Even though it has been a long time since their separation, she still has not been able to forget John and the memories of him. She then decides to find out what Chung had written as his wish when they visited the temple before. After searching through the records for some time, she finally recognizes Chung's handwriting and reads through his wish book. She is surprised to find that he had written her them all over the book, as getting her was his only wish. After a year has passed, Young Jin visits New York searching for Chung. She walks through the streets asking people about the location where she thinks Chung is staying. After walking for some time, she finally reaches her destination and sees Chung from afar. When she is about to confront him, she notices Chung helping a pregnant lady get into his car. Seeing this, Yanjin cannot control her tears and chooses to walk away. Luckily, Chang's car drives past Yanjin and he recognizes her. But when he stops the car and it's looking for Yanjin, it is already too late and he cannot find her anywhere. In the last scene of the movie, we see young Jean standing at the top of the school building, remembering her time there with Chung. Suddenly, someone pulls her hair. When she turns around, she is surprised to see Chung, who asks her if she was in New York searching for him. Yunjin only stands there without answering his question. Later, he shows her the video of the pregnant lady whom he was helping in New York and tells young Jean that she was his old friend. Realizing the misunderstanding, Yunjin starts crying and hugs Chung. The film ends with the two reuniting on the roof of their old school building. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. Thank you for watching.